Right, we'll go ahead and get started then. My name is Phil Blood. I'm co-director of ECSS. The other co-director, Bob Sinkovitz, from San Diego Supercomputer Center, normally hosts these meetings, but he's away and asked me to fill in for him, which I was happy to do. And so we will go ahead and get started without further ado. It's my pleasure to introduce Eric Morgan from Notre Dame, who will be presenting the Distant Reader, a tool for reading at scale. And so Eric, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and we'll go ahead and get started. I'll try to monitor the chat, but I think we'll leave most questions towards the end of the presentation. And then we'll introduce our next speaker.
All right, thank you very much. Like was said, my name is Eric Morgan. I work here at the University of Notre Dame. I work in the library. I write software, and I provide text mining and natural language processing services to the user community. People bring me thousands of journal articles or hundreds of books or Reddit feeds or Twitter feeds or whatever, and they say, help me read them. And so that's what I do for a living. I have an application that I call the Distant Reader. It lives on Jetstream. I get lots of help from Exceed folks, and I would like to share that with you today. I'm going to go very fast. It's thinking about it. I'm scrolling up to the top. I say go. Okay, what is the Distant Reader and why should I care? Well, the Distant Reader is a tool for reading. That's the quick and easy elevator pitch. I'm trying to make this thing get small. Hold on. Why can't I do, well, whatever. Could you guys see a Philip Blood on your screen?
I'm seeing your slides, Eric.
Only,
yeah.
Okay, oh great, you don't see the little blurbs. Okay, well, the Distant Reader, what it does is it takes an arbitrary amount of unstructured data and it outputs sets of structured data for reading. So it takes in a whole pile of text. It does analysis against the text. It creates tab-delimited text files out the wazoo. It creates summaries and keywords and parts of speech analysis. It saves all these things as tab-delimited text files. It distills everything down into a database. And then it writes reports against the database. And then you get all your original content, the text files, and all the database as an output. That's what it does. And then you're expected to read the output and learn about these 1,000 journal articles. So here's where I'm going to try to start a demo. Every time you do a computer demonstration, something goes wrong. Well, I make this small. Where's my freaking mouse? If I'm going to go to a URL, I'm going to get some quick content. I'm going to search this pile of stuff for Plato. And yes, for Plato. And I get a bunch of good things. And I only want things that are for a good time authored by Plato. So I'm going to change that to author Plato. And I'm going to limit that to things that are about virtue. Where is that virtue? And subject works, virtue. Well, it doesn't matter. Once I get this, here's a list of URLs, okay? The Distant Reader can take lots of different types of input, but one thing it can take as a list of input is URLs. I previously created a list of URLs. They're right here. There's only 5 of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a connection to the Distant Reader. And I'm going to make that small. There we go. And I'm going to go to I'll go to my dashboard and I'm going to upload a file of URLs. I'm going to call it virtue because that's what all these little books were about, virtue. And the file I want is called virtue.txt. That's my URLs. And I say go. Go, go, go. Now, while that's doing it, while that's cooking, I'll continue. So the distant reader can take a pile of different types of input. It can take a URL, a list of URLs, a file, a zip file, or a zip file plus a metadata file. If you feed it a URL, it'll go and get the content at that URL, bring it locally, find URLs in that content, go get those URLs, harvest those, and stop. If you feed it a list of URLs, it'll just go and get every single URL in that list and bring it locally. This is the most scalable option. You can put in thousands of URLs in a file. If you've got, it'll take a file as input, say some journal article. You can take the whole pile of files, PDF documents, Word documents, email messages, HTML pages, who knows what, stick them into a folder, zip up the folder, and you can submit that. Or lastly, you can do the same sort of thing as before, but create a little CSV file telling me what the authors and titles and the dates and the genre are. These are the types of input that the reader can take. Once it does that, it goes through this pipeline of processes. It creates a cache of the input. It converts all the input into plain text. It counts and tabulates all the features of the content, the words, the engrams, the bigrams, the parts of speech, the named entities. It calculates summaries and topics, and it reduces all that stuff to a database. Once it's in the database, it writes various types of reports. It zips all the reports up and all the original data into a zip file, and I call that zip file a study carrel. And then it returns the zip file for further analysis, AKA reading. So again, this is what you get as output. You get the original content, a mirror of the original content, plain text versions, which is what natural language processing has to work against, whole pile of tabular text files because everyone loves tabular text files and a lot of people can't read SQL databases. The whole thing is dumped into a relational database so you can do really cool queries and you get a couple of standalone little reports. What can this be used for? Well, let's suppose you're the undergraduate student and you have to read everything for Sociology 101. Save all your files for Sociology 101 into a directory, feed them to the reader. The reader does analysis against the result. It gives you summaries and keywords and ideas of what's going on. I expect you to read the things anyway, but the reader will supplement your process. Suppose you're a PhD student and you have to read thousands of things. Great, read them, but also feed them to the reader. Suppose you're a scientist doing literature review. Read all those documents, wonderful, but feed them to the reader as well. Or you could be a humanist studying some sort of given genre. The point we're trying to make is this isn't necessarily a digital humanities tool. This is a tool designed for anybody who does reading. What sorts of things can you read? The entire issue of a scholarly journal, all the works of a given author, all the comments from a survey, the whole of an academic website, the whole of a blog. That one's kind of cool. Feed a URL of a blog to the reader. The reader will go and suck up a lot of those blog postings and allow you to read it. It answers lots of different questions. What words or phrases are used frequently? Are there any latent themes that discussed in these sorts of things? What is discussed? Who is in the stuff? Where are things discussed from? What is the sentiment of the corpus? What places are mentioned in the corpus? What we can do information extraction. Find all sentences that have the shape of subject, verb, object, and these turn into a whole lot of assertive statements that really tell you a whole lot about the content. Here's some useful links to get you going. There's a home page. There's a set of study carrels that demonstrate some of the use of the stuff. There's a few blog postings. There's a Twitter feed, and there's a Slack channel. I think that these same links are in the comments or the chat section, and I'll put them back in there again. Show output here. So here's where I'm going to see whether or not my thing actually worked. Escape. And I go back to my reader and I go, it thinks it did it. I'm going to go to my workspace here just to check it out. No, I'm going to go to my dashboard here. Virtue, it finished. So I'm going to click on that, and it creates a couple of reports. Here's a simple one. What this tells me was that there were 5 documents in my collection. The average readability score is 79. 100 means everybody can read it. 0 means no one can read it. Here's a set of statistically significant keywords. Socrates, goodness, good, boy, compare. Who is discussed? Socrates, man, virtue. Here are some other who types of information. But here's the really cool part. Scroll, 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 scroll. Positive assertions. What sentences are in the shape of noun, verb, noun? Virtue is knowledge. So even without reading the 5 things, I begin to get an idea of what virtue is. Now I cheated, and I've looked at this before, and then there's a set of negative assertions. Virtue is not knowledge. So now I have a contradiction. The point is, though, is that the reader pulled out some sort of salient information, and it gives me an idea, what is virtue? Well, according to the 5 things that I downloaded, virtue has something to do with knowledge. If I go back, I can download this study carrel, and it's downloading its good stuff. And I'm going to hide everything else. And you end up with this folder. It's ugly as sin, and I'm just going to call it something. I don't matter what. But when you open up this folder, this study carrel, you have a whole pile of cool files. It's its own little file system. And one of the first thing that you start off with is this index.html page. And it gives me a summary of that textual thing. So my content had 5 items in it. It has 82,000 words. I have a readability scores going on here or size scores, and there's not too many that are off the charts. They're all pretty much the same. The readability, nothing's too goofy there. But then I have my words, and I have my bigrams, makes little charts. What are the statistically significant keywords? Makes a little chart. It tries to do some topic modeling against this whole thing. I end up with nouns and verbs and adjectives, proper nouns. And look, here's a proper noun. Who are these people and why should I care? They're pulling out interesting information that I might want to know about. I can do other things too, like what are the bigrams in my collection? Or I can do what sorts of proper nouns exist. But I like to pull out the grammars. Find adjective nouns. Find all the places where there's an adjective right next to a noun. So good men is an adjective noun combination that appears as many as 19 times. Well, how else are men described? Men are also described as good or other or wise or great. What other things are good? There's men, thing, friends, teachers, some person. What else can we do very briefly? We have our keywords. These are statistically keywords. These are good for like subject headings. Cancel. I can also have a very rudimentary search. So I can look for virtue. And I'll have these little summaries. It's very rudimentary. So I have that HTML page, but all in here is my raw data. So for example, I have here a list of all the named entities. Each file here is a list of named entities from one of my documents. And so if I drag this and I put this into my text editor, I have all these named entities. So it thinks that, for example, this is a person and it's in sentence 11. And it thinks that this is an organization, which isn't very good. It thinks this is a place, and this is in sentence 22. And so I can do all sorts of other analysis that I might want to do. Who is the most frequent person that lives near Sicily? Show me a map of all the places that are in my corpus. Make a timeline of all the people and their birth dates and death dates. So that's a summary of the reader's output. And go again. So I have a few possible next steps not listed in priority order. I think I'm going to create a distant reader light application, something that can work on your desktop. That I found that even though I want to process thousands of articles and hundreds of books, most people want to do just one thing at a time. I don't need a Jetstream to do that. You might create a whole pile of carols. These are a whole pile of previously published sets of stuff. And you can download a bunch of those things, and these thing called reader extras will allow you to manage giant piles of study carols. I'm thinking about creating distant reader, the appliance. This will be a bunch of pies that I'll glue together. When I lose my Jetstream allocation, I'll still have the application running around. Also, next steps include facilitating many hands-on workshops. The application works, but I need to build my user community. Nowadays, I can find plenty of content. The problem is not discovery. How do I make sense of this content? That's the purpose that the reader is exposed to help out. It's a tool for reading. And yesterday, I actually went down and laid hands on the distant reader down there in Bloomington. A good time was had by all. And that's all I have to share.
Eric, thank you for a very interesting presentation and sharing this tool with us. I want to open up for questions now from the group. So feel free to just unmute and ask your question directly. If you really prefer to put it in the chat, I can ask it for you.
Very nice. Can you say something more about the input data? Like, can you say something about journal articles that are in columns and things like that, or newspaper articles?
Oh, cool. It's not that smart. It creates a cache of content, whatever it is that you have, any kind of document, and then it feeds anything and everything to a cool Java library called TACC. And TACC simply pulls out any text that's in the document and dumps the whole thing as a plain text file. It's not very smart, but it works against a lot of content. It's unable to determine this is a column or only extract the abstract, or it doesn't do that. It just dumps everything extracts all the text from a document and saves that and does processing against that.
And what about foreign languages?
Right now, it only does English. For better or for worse, a lot of the natural language processing is done with a Python library called Spacey. Spacey supports Romance languages, but I've only made it so that it only works with English. If there was a demand, and if I could probably, with not too much difficulty, enable it to support English, Spanish, Italian, and French. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And can we use this right now?
Yes, you can. Hold on a second. Let me get my cool little notepad up, and I'll give you some interesting links.
While you're doing that, Eric, just to address a comment I saw in the chat. The question was this: so this needs to connect to Jetstream to work, but the user won't see Jetstream, right? They'll just see the websites and things that are.
That's correct.
Presented.
The home page of the tool is at distantreader.org, and anybody can create an account, and anybody can use it as much as they want to. I have to admit, it takes practice. The first time you do it, you'll be confused, but the second or third time, you'll get it under your hood. And in the chat, I put many links.
Other questions for Eric? I don't want to dominate, but I do have a couple of questions, and if others have questions, feel free to jump in after me. So I was interested in, you mentioned in terms of extracting all the text. So does that mean right now there's not a way for, say, it to tell you where in the text it found, you know, the particular structures, say, that it extracted, say, you know, what page of a book or something like that?
That's not, no, it can tell you where. When it dumps a text, there's another algorithm that I use to count the sentences. And so now that I can count the sentences, then I loop through each sentence. And so I know that there's sentence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in document A. And sentence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in document B. And then for each sentence, I know about each word. And for each word, I know its parts of speech. And so it's rather trivial to say, find all the sentences that contain this word. It doesn't know about pages, though.
Right.
It doesn't know about page numbers, but it can tell you. And so you can do interesting things like, does this idea or word or phrase appear at the beginning of the text or throughout the text or at the end of the text? So you do know positions. Yes, that's saved in the database.
Okay, so you know the relative position, but you'll have to map that to the page number or whatnot. Yes. Okay. I see some other questions popping up in the chat. Do those who ask them want to speak them out loud?
I can read them. It'll go quick.
Okay, great.
Any comments about infrastructure, i.e. basically Python? Okay, infrastructure. It's a whole Frankenstein of scripts. There's, it runs on Jetstream. It fires up a machine. Each machine has as many as 10 cores. It's written with Bash. That I have programs that do one thing and one thing only, but it's extraordinarily parallelizable. And so I use Bash as a front end to my Perl or Python scripts, and then I can use a thing called parallel to exploit all the cores on the machine, and it does its very good job. It uses Python and Perl and Bash, and there's some XSLT in there, and there's some SQL in there. Lots of different types of technology. But one thing I've tried very hard to do is all of its output is plain text. But it's basically Python. The code is available on GitHub. I guess I should add that to my cool little link, but there's no documentation there. I think it's licensed under GNU 2. Do we need a certain level of network connectivity to run it from my typical halfway decent? No, it's very easy to, you don't really run it on your machine. You submit a job and all the work happens down there in Bloomington, and then you just need a web browser to go get your content. So you don't need a very strong connection at all. Those are the only questions I see.
There's a few more if you scroll down, I think.
Is the code available license? What are the underlying parsers based on? The Stanford tools? Oh, the underlying parsers have a common number of things. I ought to document them more. I use a little bit of a Python library called GenSim. And GenSim, to calculate keywords, uses a variation of the PageRank algorithm. It also uses a different algorithm to create textual summaries of each thing, a paragraph. And then a lot of the other work is done through Spacy, and Spacy gives you a model to work against. I have to admit, I haven't really looked very hard as to what that model is or how it works. I trust it, I believe it. I understand that that's not good enough for real research purposes, but you can use Spacy to create your own models. I hope that's good enough.
And I think you already commented on the last one I see, which is you need to document these still.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Great. Wonderful. Any other questions? I have one quick question. So in terms of do you have a feel for on Jetstream, how many cores are you using at a time, for example?
Well, the way it's set up, Eric Coulter has helped me do this, and the way that is set up is when a new job comes, we fire up a machine with 10 cores. I have as many as 144 at my disposal, so therefore I can have as many as 5 or 6 of these jobs running at one time.
So that's scalable based on the number of jobs you receive then?
Yes, definitely. And
Great.
I learned that if I have more cores, it will use them all. That's really fun. Thank
looks
you,
like
folks.
What looks like one more question slid in there. We still have a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Let's see the last
How
question.
you develop this in connection with Science Gateways Institute? Yes. I was awarded an exceed allocation. They asked me to participate in a Science Gateways Institute. I think they called it a boot camp. I think that's what you're alluding to. And I participated in that boot camp. And it was basically business planning 101 for your cool gateway application. That was very helpful. And I've been working with folks from Exceed in terms of usability and getting the infrastructure going and having an Arivata front end. That's the whole thing that gets your job, and then Slurm fires up the OpenStack and makes the machine, and it does its good work, and then when it's all done, everything dies gracefully.
Wonderful. Any last questions for Eric?
The boot camp was very helpful.
All right. Well, thank you again, Eric. Very interesting application and tool that you've developed there. Are you looking for anyone to work with you on this?
Yes,
are you the sole developer?
Yeah, I'm the sole developer. I learned about a year ago. I'm a full stack developer, but I can always use some help.
Okay, so open source project also. So if others are interested, spread the word, right?
Yes, please.
Excellent. All right. Well, it was great hearing about that, and thank you again for joining us on our symposium.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and transition now to our next speaker. So if you want to unshare, Eric, and then Amit, you can start sharing. So we have Amit Gupta from the Texas Advanced Computing Center joining us now to talk about his work extracting domain information using deep learning. So Amit, as soon as you're ready, go ahead.
Sure, thank you, Phil. So hi, everyone. I'm Amit Gupta. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So I'm Amit Gupta from the Texas Advanced Computing Center, and I'm here to present on extracting domain information using deep learning. And this is joint work with my colleague Weijia Zhu, also at TACC. So we work in the Scalable Computational Intelligence group at TACC. And our collaborators, Pankaj Jaiswal from Oregon State, who's a plant biologist, and Crispin Taylor and Jennifer Regala from the American Society of Plant Biology. And you'll see why the plant biology theme is relevant here. That's our primary use case. So, okay. So the agenda for this this talk is basically this research was presented at Berkeley earlier this year, and it's essentially our exploration into deep learning for entity recognition, and the specific use case is for biological entities, and more specifically, it's entity recognition from the plant biology journal articles, and specifically we work with the two journals that is the two premier journals in the field of plant biology. One is the Plant Cell, and the other is Plant Physiology. And to that end, we've at TACC we developed this tool called Domain Informational Vocabulary Extraction. And this is for the extraction and curation of biological entities using author input. I see there's some comment on the chat there. Okay, great.
I'll try to monitor that for you.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, I'll try not to be distracted with that. And so, so I'll give you an overview of the tool that we created for this purpose. Then we'll give you a brief overview of some of the comparable systems for this task. Namely, there's a tool called Abner, which uses conditional random fields. And then I'll give you an overview of the tool that uses deep learning and that we've tried to apply for this task called NeuroNER. At that point, I'll give you a brief overview of how we have created a goal data set for this task using the Dive tool. And then we'll compare some results of all of them along the way. So the problem, similar to what Eric highlighted in his talk, there's a large number of online publications, and in the scientific domains they grow at an alarming rate, and all of this information needs significant expertise to understand. It's often the first appearance in text of a new terminology or a new idea, so often this information is novel, and there are a lot of new words or entities that need to be identified and maybe curated by experts. And if you go into the pure sciences, plant biology and so forth, you would find that there's a large number of ontologies very meticulously maintained by hand for every subfield, every sub-branch of a field. And there's someone who's sitting there maintaining it's sort of their full-time job to do so. And this was very new to me. It was only first apparent to me when I visited one of these ontology conferences, and it's pretty obvious that a manual solution will not scale to the pace of new information being published out there in journal articles, and therefore a computational approach was required. Right. So to that end, we created this tool that we call Domain Informational Vocabulary Extraction, or DIVE, and this is a text-based information extraction system. And we've primarily developed it around this use case for plant biology journal articles, but it's easily adaptable to any kind of body of text. So it extracts biological entities. It uses a combination of methodologies like keyword dictionaries. It uses you can put in regular expression rules. It can use publishing conventions. So it has this framework that you can plug in these different rules, and it would use a combination of all of them to extract entities that may be of interest to you. There's also functionality in there to infer new relationships between entities. It could use the structure information, so whether it's something occurs in the heading or a paragraph or figure caption and so forth, and the actual data in the text as well. And what's more important in this tool is it exposes all this via a web front end. It stores all of this in a database and exposes it via a web front end to the expert user, who can actually make corrections and give their own inputs in helping curate this information that was extracted from this text. So this is we work in collaboration with our colleagues at the American Society of Plant Biologists, and they publish and maintain these two top journals that we work with in plant biology. And they work with a company called Sheridan Journal Services that run their software and web services for authors to publish as authors publish in their journals and go through the proofing process, that software and web service is run by Sheridan Journal Services. And we worked with them to integrate our tool with their web service, and it's deployed live as of March last year. We also cross-link with other existing ontologies. So our collaborators of Pankaj Jaiswal is involved with the Grameen plant biology genome ontology. And so we our tool cross-links some information with their ontology as well. So this is a brief overview of what's going on in Dive. So we get from Sheridan, we get an input of the articles. When someone submits an article to them, their internal view of this article is this proprietary XML format that they use. So we get a copy of that. We extract the article text, the plain text of the article, and the meta information, so the structural information of the article. And then we run it through our pipeline that uses the 4 methodologies that I mentioned. So regular expressions, cross-linking with other existing ontologies. And there could be certain naming conventions that are specific to the plant biology community, and also the publishing standards. So there could be conventions that are print conventions that are specific to the publishers of this article. So we could use all of these various type of rules. And we also then use that to produce a list of entity candidates. And they could be related to the previous evaluations by authors. It could be parts of speech, how likely it is to occur with other entities, other known entities, and word similarity. So we could use all of these approaches, and then we expose all of that to the authors with a web front end. All of this gets stored in a database, and that's what drives the web front end. So this is an overview of our integration with their web service, with the publisher's web service. So I'll briefly explain it. How it works is someone submits an article to one of these journals, and they internally create an XML representation of this article, of this file. And then they step through, then they step through a proofing process with a publication editor. That is just to make sure, that's just the process they go through to make sure that there are no technical mistakes or even grammatical mistakes or typos, that sort of thing. They go through this process to eliminate those type of errors to maintain their publishing standards. And so the authors go through this thing that I'm pointing at with my mouse. And at the same time, once they go through the initial changes, they give us a copy of this article. And then we run our entity extractions, store that stuff in the database. As the authors are going through their proofing process with them, they are given a task to visit our tool. When we have got a copy of their article, we have created a specific landing page for them, for every article, unique to every article. And then, so they're given this task to go visit that page. So as part of their proofing process, they get a link. They say, okay, go visit this link and do curations on your article. So they show up at this page that we set up for them. Now, so the author is the subject matter expert of the content of their article, and that's why this is useful, is they can help curate the information that is extracted from their own articles. So the information could be very technical. Could be very difficult for someone else to curate. So at this point, they can, if the Dive tool has extracted something that's, let's say it's not an entity, they can make corrections there. If we missed an entity, they could add it over there, and so on and so forth. So they can finish some curation inputs here, and then return back to their proofing process when they're done. And eventually, they also pull a list of the curated terms from our dive tool and embed it into their article to help the discovery of their article. So they have a list of terms at the end of their article that are most relevant to that publication. So this is the overview of the tool. This is an example of what they see when they show up at their landing page. So they see their article title, ID, this is the journal, the plant cell. They see a description of why they're doing this step and instructions to follow. And below this, in the same page, they see a list of extracted entities. So you can see examples of a gene, the protein, the kind of species. This is cross-linked with other existing ontologies. If something, let's say if this thing here is not a gene, they can delete it. Or if we got the species wrong, they can edit. If they see something, if they find something's missing, like we didn't detect a gene that they expected, they can click on this button and add a new record. And when they're done with all of these, when they're satisfied with this list, they can hit finalize curation for this article that sort of freezes the changes on this article. And this tool uses its own ranking model based on the types of entities that are of interest, and it has these functionalities for curation. An edit would take them to this page. Let's say if they want to correct any one of these fields, add a new species. They also get the sentences within the article that contain that particular entity. So this is provided for context for the authors. And when they add something brand new, they get a form to do that as well. And so the present curation activity is the last almost 2 years now. We've have about close to 1,000 articles, 973 articles. About 298 are from the plant cell, 675 from plant physiology. We have like about 43,000 entities that were learned by this tool. Genes and proteins form the bulk of the entities that are of interest to the authors here. And we have almost close to 10,000 curation changes, which are, as you can see, most of them are biased towards deleting. So the initial architecture of the dive tool detects a lot of entities that the authors think are not relevant for their paper. So in terms, just to give you context for that, an entity, an article may have several entities, but only one of them might be the focus of the paper. The others could be, an apparatus name, or a gene, or a chemical name, or a reagent name. That could just be incidental to the work, but may not be the focus of the paper. So, so you would find that initially the authors are presented with a lot of extra entities that are correctly detected as entities, but may not be the focus point of their paper. So this is the rough distribution of articles that get submitted every month and come through our tool. Roughly, we find a 2/3 to 70 to 30, 2/3 to 1/3 split between these two journals. And we see roughly 80% of the entities of interest are proteins and genes. You have some of the others, but by and large, it's proteins and genes that the authors are interested in. So that's the overview of our tool, Dive. I'll give you a quick overview of the Abner tool. This is it's also called the Biological Named Entity Recognizer, and it uses a conditional random field model. It's built on, it comes with two built-in pre-trained models. One is called Abner Bio, which is trained on PubMed abstracts. And the other one is called NLPBA. These are basically names of the conferences where this model was published. And this one is trained on Medline abstracts. And it also has a front end that you can use that users can use to manually annotate genes and so forth. So only thing to remember here is they are trained only on abstracts and not on full-length articles, and therefore their training corpus is very small. And now we come to the NeuroNER tool that we try to explore for improving entity recognition within Dive. So this is it's a tool. It's written around TensorFlow. So it's kind of like a wrapper, easy to use wrapper around TensorFlow, and it implements a bidirectional LSTM network that basically tries to learn from forward and backward sequences of tokens or words from plain text. And it essentially it's we'll go over describing its architecture briefly. It consists of 3 layers. One is the token embedding layer, the label prediction layer, and the label sequence optimization layer. And so this is what the architecture looks like. Certainly looks very complicated. It did to me initially when I came across it. And so we'll go over it step by step. We'll look at this block first, and then we'll look at this, and then we'll look at that. So so this is the token embedding layer. So this essentially, they also call it the character enhanced token embedding layer. And there's more details on this at their publications here. So you can refer to that, but I'll briefly give you an overview. So what this is basically, these are the tokens or letters in a word. You could think of it as letters in a word. So these are individual characters in a token, and they have a model that converts a token into a vector representation. So that's what they call the character embedding. So they convert a character to its vector representation, and then they pass it through a bidirectional LSTM network. So bidirectional basically means is they're trying to capture the notion of order in terms of the character sequence. So they try to learn from the forward and the backward sequence of a character. So it's fed through one LSTM in the forward direction. So the first token goes in first, then the second, then and so on. And then they also get fed in the reverse direction. And their model tries to learn from both directions of the sequence. And also they feed the same token right here into a token embedding. So they have a pre-built-in model like Word2Vec or Glove that are embedded. I think they use Spacey as well internally. And Spacey ships with these 2 pre-trained models. So these are pre-trained models on bodies of text found on the internet. So like say Wikipedia or a collection of basically plain text. So these are basically language models for words of the English language. And so that token gets converted to a vector representation of according to these models. So and then they try to create a unified view of a unified representation of this token. The idea of combining the character embedding and the token embedding is that if the token itself is not an English word, let's say, it could be a gene name or something like that, like PRF1, something like that, that's not found in the English dictionary. They have some vector representation of that as well. So they use the standard English language models. They use the forward sequence of the token characters, and they use the backward sequence of the token characters, and they sort of combine these vectors to create one unified view of any token. And they do this for every word or every token in the sentence. So now once they have that, they move on to the label prediction layer, which is again a bidirectional LSTM layer, and it takes in the token embedding or the vector representation of the token, and its output, again, it's also tries to learn from the forward and backward sequences of the tokens. And its output is basically a vector representation, a vector of the probability of a token belonging to a certain label. So if you have a fixed number of labels that you could assign to a particular token, so you could say gene or protein. This is a gene, or this is a protein. This is a whatever, and it would be a let's say for simplicity, let's just consider a gene and a protein, just two labels. This vector would be a probability of a token being labeled as a gene or a protein. So it would be two probability values in that vector. And after that, once it has these vector probabilities, the last layer of label sequence optimization, it takes these probabilities and then it assigns a label to a token. And the simplistic one could be, it could take the maximum probability, but there's also room here to use label sequences. So let's say a gene might occur right before or after a different token. So let's say if the plain text says gene, something activates this gene. So a gene would occur in the neighborhood of the word activate. And so they could use things like this to assign a label as well. So that's what that last layer does. I believe they use a conditional random field here for this. It also has a lot of these hyperparameters that you could tune, and it's in the parameters file. So I'll go on to say what the data set was that we used. So we used NeuroNER on our data set that we created from Dive and the author inputs into Dive. And so we had about 400 journal articles, and we converted them into this what's called the BRAT format. So the BRAT format is very simple. It's essentially you extract the article text into a raw text file, and then you have an annotation file. The annotation file sort of looks like this. It basically, for every row, it assigns a label. In every row, there's a label that's assigned, and it tells you where in the article, in terms of character index, that label occurred, and the actual entity name that it wanted to label. So, and repetitions are allowed. So you could have multiple repetitions, multiple occurrences of this entity in the text, and it'll show you in subsequent rows where else it occurred in that article. And we use basically the author inputs and whatever was detected in Dive to create this data set. And for simplicity, we just created two classes in our annotation files. One is the positive author interest, which we defined as genes and proteins. We see is 80% of what the authors are interested in. And the other ones were negative author interest, which authors seem not to be interested in. In some cases, these were deleted by the authors when they were shown in the Dive web front end. And so we know for sure the authors are not interested in those entities. So we created these two classes in the annotation file. So this basically, we want this neural network to try to learn these classes on its own before, instead of having the author prune these things out. And then we partitioned this data set into like three for training, testing, and validation. So we did a 80-10-10% split. And also we created three variants of this data set, wherein the units of text that we provided for them were varied. So we changed the granularity of the unit of text provided for training. So one variant had the full article text, the other had just so we took the full article text and broke it down into units of 300 words each, and the other one was 1,000 words each.
So Amit, I just want to give you a heads up. We got about 3 minutes left.
Okay, I'll wrap it up. We are on the results already. So yeah, this is just the summary of the data set, the 3 variants of the data set. And in terms of our results, let's just focus on the results. So Dive and the Abner tools are essentially only capable of detecting what is of interest to the author. It has its internal way to detect an entity, and it presents it to the author saying, this is what I think you might be interested in. So they did just detect the one class, whereas the NeuroNER is able to detect 2 classes, wherein it can say that this is what the author might be interested in, but it can also prune out things that the author might not be interested in. So it helps give a better filtered list to the authors. So, and it varies vastly in terms of accuracy. It's vastly superior accuracy through the NeuroNER. We see in comparison, it's more than double as accurate. And also, when we shrink the size of the word units of text that we give to NeuroNER, its accuracy vastly improves to up to 80% for both the classes. So that's what we're seeing: precision and recall values for these. This is what the training through the epochs for the NeuroNER is for both these classes. So again, we see the smaller word granularity does better. And same for recall performance. And currently the thing that we're dealing with is that the training time for this neural network model is quite large. So per epoch, it takes about 3.5 to 4 hours, as you can see. With smaller files, with the smaller text granularity, it has to deal with more files transferred to the GPU and so forth. That improves the I/O overhead as well on CPU. So we see the training time only go up when we shrink the units of text. So we get better accuracy, but the training time goes up. So it takes a long time to train them. So this, while the results are promising, we are looking at improving the training time, improving the GPU performance, incorporating. If we can improve the training time, we can incorporate more entity classes instead of just 2 classes. And so, to conclude, I'll say that this the NeuroNER model seems to be a promising approach that we would like to integrate into Dive, but we are still working on performance improvements. And we're also looking at other application scenarios outside of plant biology, like aerospace engineering right now, but you'll hear more about that in the future. So with that, I'll take questions. If you manually maintain a corpus of scientific documents, please feel free to contact Veja or myself. Also, please refer to our paper if you want to learn more, or if you're doing related work, you might even cite it if you find it relevant. So I'll take questions at this point. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Amit, for that very interesting talk. We are at the hour, and unfortunately, I have to drop off for another meeting, but maybe I can call on my colleague Sergio if you can stick around for a couple of minutes
Yes.
to help with the questions. Is that all right, Sergio? Did I hear
Yes, it
Sergio?
is. Just took me some time to unmute.
Okay.
So I don't see any.
Thanks, Phil, and I'm sorry for going over the time. Thank you.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I just happened to have a quick deadline after, but sure. Great talk, and I look forward to seeing more about this. There were a few questions in the comments
yes.
to maybe get started.
Can you see those, Amit?
Yes, I'm looking through them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would anybody who asked them actually want to raise them, or is it okay if Amit just answers them one by one?
Yes, I
Amit, yeah,
trying to look at the timestamp when I began. Okay, right there.
No, these
is
are
Dive also a Science Gateway instance? No, it's not. It's a tool that we developed in-house. It's actually not related to ECS. It wasn't done on the ECSS under the ECSS grant. I was just contacted by Bob. He said the ECSS folks might find this interesting, and therefore I decided to sort of give my PERC presentation again here, thinking with updated numbers and so forth. So it's not part of the Science Gateway instance. It's a sort of standalone tool that we've developed here. And it's presently deployed live, integrated with this publishing service at ASPD.
So, and then the next question, as you see, kind of asks whether it's hosted on Jetstream. I guess no, but where does it run?
It runs on our VM farm at TACC, and presently it's just it's not. We get, because these articles are published just one at a time, so we don't get like a huge corpus all at once. We get these articles one at a time, so we haven't really used too much of HPC in the pipeline. And
but I guess since you say that you would like to speed up the performance, maybe.
Yes. So the neural network training part was run on Maverick 2, which is the TACC resource here. Yes. So that's the part where we went to the HPC for when we started exploring neural networks. Until then, just the deployed web service is just running on a VM here. But yeah, the neural network training is where we're sort of using HPC.
Okay. And then you see the next one, which may be addressed in, but
yes. So this seems to have a very specific use case, namely for plant biology entity curation. Is that correct? So that's the use case we developed this around, because we had collaborators who were happening to work in that area. There's nothing in the tool itself that's specific to that, meaning it's all very plug and play. So it could very easily be adapted to any other, a corpus from any other domain. We are presently looking at applying it to a corpus from aerospace engineering. So it's not really specific to that. The present implementation is specific to plant biology. So that is correct in that sense.
Okay. Is everybody happy with the answers Amit gave to these questions? Okay, I take it that's the case. And then, does anybody have any final questions for Amit? Okay, if not, then thank you again, everyone. And happy holidays, happy New Year. And look forward to the first ECSS Symposium of 2020. Bye.
Great. Thank you all. Bye-bye.